Hey guys, I apologize for the abruptness of this video, but I really wanted to get it out there. I know many of you may be struggling during this holiday weekend with going to social events that involve drinking, maybe involve drug use for you. So I wanted to get this message out there. My experience with these things, how I've navigated them, the things I did wrong, and now the things I think that I'm doing pretty okay. So let's get into it.
I'm JT. I'm in my mid-30s, have a 10-year media career, and nearly a decade of sobriety. So how did another middle-class kid turn into a blackout drunk and a heroin junkie? More importantly, how did it change, and where do we go from here? This is my story.
Yeah, like I said with the subject matter, I would have definitely preferred to have gotten this out maybe early in the weekend, maybe last week, but I've been struggling. I've been having some personal struggles getting some things done outside of my day-to-day work and the little personal stuff that I get in outside of work during the week. But the more I thought about it over the weekend, I was like, I have to carve some time out to do this. And even though I'm going to try and get this out and edit it as fast as I can to put it out before midnight of 4th of July. So anyone that might be out there, might be struggling on this day and this weekend in particular, that you can view it and hopefully get something from it. So let's get into it. Holiday weekends specifically, and we've talked about, like the Christmas and Thanksgiving holidays and some of the little things I've done before. Those are, I kind of think, a little bit in a different category, and I'll probably dig into those even deeper later this year than a holiday like 4th of July. And look, we could talk about all the ways we aren't actually talking about the real reasons that these things are celebrated, so I don't want to get into all that. What I do want to talk about is, look, 4th of July, whether you like it or not, it's a big drinking holiday. For me, it was also a big drug use holiday. And look, we all want to go to social events with our friends or family and have a great time and eat great food and celebrate our great country. But the fact of the matter is that alcohol is everywhere. It's hard to avoid it. And for some of us, it may even be another excuse to drink or to use drugs. I know for me, it was. I had the big thing of FOMO. Before that was even a term, I had FOMO. I wish I'd had the term. It'd be easier to denote back then. But I had the big fear of missing out back in my drinking and drug use days. And I was always working towards, okay, when's that next event where I'm really going to have just like such a great time? It didn't usually end up being such a great time. I mean, I may have pieced it together afterwards to convince myself it was a great time, but in my drinking, it was usually a complete mess. And so you may have that sort of thing in your head going off in your addict brain, or maybe you don't even know it's your addict brain yet, saying, this is my moment. This is the moment where everyone else is drinking. This is the moment we all can drink in these situations. And maybe if you even got a ride or a designated driver or an Uber, and you go, this is going to be the time where I'm going to have a great time. But if you have any, even very small inkling in your heart or mind about maybe I'm making all this up in my head. Maybe it's not really a good time. And maybe I look at these big holiday drinking events, and in reality afterwards, most of the time I'm going, man, I really probably had too much. Or man, I really wish I hadn't said that thing to that person. Or maybe it was really bad and you've got this demoralization after, when you feel incredible guilt and shame about your behavior. That was the case for me most of the time. I don't have enough time. I literally don't have enough time on my data card to go over all the embarrassing 4th of July just on this holiday drinking stories that I have. But I'll tell you an abbreviated version of one. Me and my best friend, who I've talked about here, who is also sober, he got sober a couple years before me. His uncle has a lake house, and we were going to this lake house since we were, 15. And since that time, using that time to drink and do drugs. And it was all fun and good most of the time. But the very last year that I was drinking and using, and he wasn't anymore, I went to this event, and I was so bad in my heroin addiction at that point that just a few years prior, before he got sober, he was kind of making a mess of himself, and I was kind of cleaning it up a little bit, going, oh, trying to, make his mom feel better and like all this sort of stuff, and going. And I was an addict at the time and probably knew I was an alcoholic, and still didn't think I was that bad to where I would like embarrass myself that bad in front of family that I really like respected. I would embarrass myself all day in front of like maybe my personal immediate family, or maybe definitely my college friends. I had no problem embarrassing myself there. It was such a catastrophe. They had the big like fireworks celebration. Everybody's sitting out on the dock. I hurled in front of everyone, and the people who didn't hear it smelled it, and it was a complete disaster. I was doing heroin out of my car while everyone was still out walking around. And in my drug addicted mind, I was like getting away with it. And like later I would find out, we're like, oh yeah, we saw JT. He was like hanging outside of his car. Like he was about to hit the ground. We were worried about him. And there was like this weird substance in the middle of his truck. And then the next day they're like trying to leave, and, I'm sleeping till noon. They're wondering if I'm alive. That was the last 4th of July. Okay, there's a lot more stories that are a lot worse. And in that case, I was so deep in my heroin addiction that I didn't deal with the demoralization of how much I had embarrassed myself at all. I remember this vividly. I literally just drove directly from the lake to my heroin dealer to get more drugs because, if in the times that I could manage to keep using, then I could just forego all that having to think about the guilt and shame of my behavior altogether. But we're getting off the beaten path. I just wanted to present that to let you know I was chock full of bad situations with my drinking around the 4th of July holiday. So here's kind of the things I want to lay out for you. If you have that thing in your mind going like, do I really need to do this? Like maybe this always ends up worse for me than actually good. Here's the things I would lay out. Number 1, you don't have to go. If there's an event, a big event, and there's going to be a bunch of drinking and you're thinking you might have a problem, you don't have to go. I know it's hard, and I know we all want to go to these social situations, but I would just say if not going, here's what I think to myself. I even think, look, I'm on 4th of July holiday. I'm sitting here doing a video about not drinking and using instead of doing anything fun. But the point is that me staying home, as miserable as it might be sometimes, or as lonely as I might be, is definitely for me better than getting a DWI, hurting someone, saying something to someone that I'm going to regret and might deeply affect our relationship, having that demoralization, guilt, and shame the next day. It's all better than that, and you could keep going down the list of bad things that could happen. So it's definitely better. But it can even be good. I recommend to anyone, if you're seeing this late at night and it's a holiday, so you might not be able to go to a gym, but get out and go for a run if you're physically able, or a really intense walk. I've always found that a run, anything that I would have done after that, as boring as it might seem on its face, is more enjoyable because the feeling of after a great run is so incredibly great. Watching TV, reading a book, and I'm not a voracious reader, meditating, prayer, like you can go down the list of things that you could do alone in your house, and they're a lot more fun after a run. And all those things might be fun to you, and maybe even more fun than the consequences of possibly going to this event and having to, and ended up drinking too much or using drugs and alcohol when that's what you really don't want to do. Now, on the other hand, I do go to these events now that I'm sober, and I have little protocols in place that are very helpful to me. Number 1, and I would recommend this to anyone in this situation, I bring along it doesn't have to be a date, but someone to come to the event with me that knows my situation and gets it. And we can kind of lay out the plan ahead of time. Someone who's not going to judge and is supportive and is also not, on the other hand, you also don't want someone who's going to be like really heavy-handed about, oh, don't have that. That's not the point. You don't want to ever I don't want to ever go to an event and have other people's enjoyment affected by the need for me to stay sober. Like, if that's the case for me, then I just don't need to be going to an event. But I think it's perfectly possible and healthy to be able to go to an event where that, there might be drinking there. I probably wouldn't recommend going to one where people get really out of hand. But if it's like, a family event, an adult event, maybe there's kids there, but there's just going to be a little more drinking than normal, just have a little set of guidelines and you go over it with this person that you go with. Number one, a timeline. Here's the time that I know I'm going to get out. Sometimes you do that. Here's the time I know I'm going to get out, whether that means that I get to say goodbye to everybody or not. Here, if it's not a time, then here are the things that I start to notice that trigger me that I may need to recognize as these are my cues of it's about time to go. That's how I usually do it. Like, I might have a direct timeline of I know I can spend 2 hours at this thing or 3 hours at this thing. More often I think in my head, okay, about 2 hours might be good, but here are the triggers that I know to look for that when they happen, I can go, okay, it's time to wrap it up. And it can really be as simple as that. A couple other things that have helped me in the past. This really helped me when I first stopped drinking. I always had a club soda. So whether that meant that I walked in the place with it myself or it was the first thing I did when I got there, a lot of times that you get them in a plastic cup that looks just like everyone else's. People don't tend to really ask about it if they see you have a sparkling drink. It turns out that fewer people actually asked than I thought would. Fewer people actually cared. The people who are gonna ask are gonna ask anyways because they just notice that sort of thing. So you're not gonna be able to not avoid that. You're not going to be able to avoid that altogether. There will be someone there who notices that you're not drinking, but it's far less common than I would have thought, or I know a lot of my friends that got sober would have thought, because we're always thinking we're the center of the universe, It's just one of those things. So those are some just little key components that I go through to go, should I even go to this event? Is it what's best for me? And if I am going to go, here's how I'm going to get through it. And here are the things that I'm going to avoid. And I think to start from the starting point of, I don't even have to go, is a great place to start from. Because from then on, anything that might make you uncomfortable through the whole process can just lead you to leaving. That's the beautiful thing about it. And the fact of the matter is, when you ghost, I don't know if you've ever done that, but I don't typically do this, but in the past I have before just gone, okay, I'm just going to leave. I'm not saying goodbye to anybody. I don't recommend it because it's not socially nice. If someone's inviting you to an event, it's nice to say goodbye to everyone. But if it's so bad that you think you need to get out of there, just get out of there. And that's the great thing about when you start from the point of, I don't even really have to be there. I don't have to go. It's not necessary that I go. It's probably better that I don't go. Then from then on, you can kind of make a good adjustment for, I'm going to get out of here at any point. So I wish you the best and I really hope you're getting to see this before anything may materialize this holiday weekend. I just wanted to get this out there because I know a lot of people deal with this. It was a big thing for me when I was trying to get sober at the peak of my alcoholism and drug addiction, and then it's been a tough thing since I've gotten sober. It's better. It's a lot better now. It's pretty easy now. I don't even really worry about it or think about it. And plus, I've been sober so long that everybody knows, and nobody's really worried about it. Everyone's adjusted to how I am and knows that I'm not imposing anything on anyone else. So it's one of those things that's a real nice perk of long-term sobriety is the places that you would go, like the friends that you have, the circles that you have, know that you're a good time And they are also people that you've become comfortable with being around regardless of their normal behavior. So it's one of those things that I probably don't talk about enough, the real nice perks of long-term sobriety. And that's one of them. After you start stringing together some time and you find the right playmates and they are comfortable around you not drinking, it's really an amazing thing. It creates circumstance where you really don't even have to think about it. Okay, hope you enjoy. Let's get the mail. Today's mail actually is connected a little bit to the subject, and this is not from a recent video, but it is a recent comment from the Jabba Lady video. It just people keep seeing it. It's great. I have no problem with it. I'm glad people are coming to the channel. But you can, of course, feel free to comment on newer videos as well. But this one was really good, and I wanted to circle it. It comes from Carol, and Carol says, "Thanks for this interesting video. I love how you took a public figure and used his recovery story as an example of how the process works for ordinary people. One thing I wish you could have given more examples, like when you were talking about how recovery often changes good things in a person's personality as well as bad things, and you said that's how it went for you. I would have appreciated an example or two, maybe things that weren't too personal, or maybe it's all too personal, in which case I understand why you wouldn't want to share it. It would have made it a lot more interesting and illuminating, just a thought." Carol, thank you. Thank you for watching. Thank you for the positive feedback. And you are absolutely right. I could have illuminate more. Nothing's too personal as yet, as far as I can tell. So it's not about that. I just didn't think to, and I should have dug in more on that. So let me try to break this down a little more. I think what Carol's asking is, I was talking about when people get sober that relationships end a lot of times, and you would think that the hardest part is past. So like when you go through rehab and all that stuff, like the significant other has been through the peak of the addiction and all that bad behavior. So if you've been through, quote unquote, the hardest part, why then do people dissolve these relationships after the hardest part? And one of the reasons I said was because there's such a dramatic metamorphosis from someone when they really get sober, when it's the time, from the person they were, even the person before they started the really bad drinking and using, to the person that is now. And so she's asking, what are some of those things that, you know, might be good or bad that might cause that breakup? And for me, I wasn't in that situation. I wasn't in a relationship when I got sober. But let me just try to talk about some of the things that are different about me that may make that difficult. And I changed in a lot of different ways. One of those would be just, you know, my general outlook on life was changing rather rapidly. So my attention, number one, my attention to my sobriety became the biggest thing in my life. So I could certainly see how if I'd been in a relationship, sobriety all of a sudden went to number one. Where when drugs and alcohol were number one and the relationship was maybe, who knows, number two, you know, the significant other might not even realize that, may think they're higher up on the scale than they really are, maybe because there's a lot of intimacy through fights, through conflict. So I could see how that could happen, because my attention to everything else in my life, even my familiar relationships, I didn't even really get to the point of starting to repair those until several months into my sobriety, because the sobriety had to be number one. And that was very difficult, but I had to put a lot of other things on the back burner. You can imagine, it was very difficult for me to put my job on the back burner. Even as effed up as I was, I was still dedicated. It held me back from being as good as I could have been, but I was still held my job in such high esteem. It was very difficult for me to put my job behind my sobriety, especially early in sobriety when I had to say, nope, no matter what, I got to be at this thing. And it caused some awkward moments at times. But so just the fact that sobriety goes to number one would be a big one. The things that I value in relationships changed dramatically. This may fall into the category of too personal, so I may be dancing around this a little bit. But for example, before I got sober, sex and attractiveness were probably the most important things to me in who I was dating. And I'm not proud to say that, but that's the reality of where I was as a 25-year-old drug addict and alcoholic. And that didn't change immediately because I think those things were still probably too important in my first relationship after I got sober. Definitely too important after I got sober. But as I evolved, real intimacy is what's important to me now. And especially since I got past my first relationship in sobriety, I've changed to the point where, I just don't give in to my every whim, sexually speaking, even when I'm in a relationship with someone. Because I have an addictive relationship with that. I didn't know I did. It's one of those things that I discovered after I got sober from drugs and alcohol, because I think I ended up transferring some of that addiction into relationships, into love and sex. And there's a whole program for that, which I have attended. So that can cause issues you could see in a relationship. Just personal. The intimacy that's important to me now is like trust and communication. And that doesn't mean that I'm like abstinent by any means. I try to be when I'm not in a relationship. I think that's important to me. But it means that, oftentimes like where I am in my life or my sobriety may affect how, I'm trying to think of the scientific way to say this, how interested I am in the exact moment to be physically intimate with someone I'm in a relationship with. So if you thought some of these things might be too personal, clearly they're not. I'm still probably not revealing everything. But so anyways, those are just a couple of the things that are different about me now than were before I got sober and might affect a relationship. Although again, I wasn't in one when I first got sober. I hope that at least starts to answer your question, Carol. Thank you. If you would like to participate, you can of course comment on the video. You can reach out at any of the following social media handles, and we hope to hear from you. We'll see you next time. Hey family, if you like what we're doing here and you want to see more, please hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. Share it with someone who you think might benefit from watching this, and feel free to comment below. Love.